Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City building and code consulting firm here in New York City. Today, I have a great pleasure of having Eric Goshow of Goshow Architects. Eric, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this very important thing. I love it. Thank you.
Oh, you're quite welcome. So, Eric, you and I were old timers.
Yeah.
We've been around the block. Design is set as is having its 40th anniversary in May. So we have worked together through the decades on all kinds of projects, from schools to housing, and here we are today. Uh, New York City's in a housing crisis. Um,
Definitely.
you and I are very much involved in that. With your wife Nancy, as a WBE firm, you do take on a lot of city projects,
Right.
and there's a big need. So tell us a little bit about what you're hearing and what you're seeing about the housing crisis here in New York City, and what where the attention is going, because it seems like it's getting a lot of press.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for inviting me to be part of this. And as you know, we're working together on a NYCHA project right now.
Hmm.
NYCHA's been a big client of ours over the years, and it's kind of a shame that the money necessary to maintain existing housing is not there. I mean,
Correct.
how many housing units does NYCHA have? 377,000, I think.
Right.
And just keeping the existing product in good shape is enormously expensive, and
Sure.
it somehow has gotten a little bit out of hand. So we are very, very happily involved with Night because it's part of what we very strongly believe in. First of all, maintain what you've got,
Well,
keep it
and
there. That's
Eric, that's a great point. We do a lot of work for the Archdiocese of New York and the Archdiocese of Brooklyn and Queens, and that's always been a problem for them as well, which is, there's someone who's running this parish, and the dollar amount that escalates over a 15-year period to do a roof, to maintain the HVAC system, to maintain the carpets and the windows, and it just gets crazy expensive. But when you have 377,000 units, and a lot of them are individual buildings, we'll have 15 buildings on one site. So it's not like you're spending money on one building, you're spending money on 15 roofs, 30 elevators, hundreds of windows, hundreds of boilers. It's so we've seen um an influx that this is now starting to take off. They have created the PACT program where they're partnering with developers and other management companies to start to maintain them privately and through the city together. What have you heard about that? And I would tend to think that could be quite successful.
Yeah. Well, we love the P3 model. The public-private partnerships, and to bring the private sector into this game, I think is very, very, very important. Um, and we're very much involved in that in several ways. It's very important for us to bring everybody and all the resources possible into this thing. So I think the PAC program is really good. The thing is, why didn't they do this years and years ago? you know.
Well, that's a great question, because you know we 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 see that in a lot of big cities. You would tend to think that sometimes the big cities are the leaders, but a lot of times they're the followers. And I'll never forget this. A gentleman who I still speak to a lot. His name is Tom Phillips, and he works on the regional part of Target stores. And when they first came to New York City, he says, "Well, I don't understand. How do we have to keep renewing a TCO for 20 years? Everywhere else in the world, you finish your space. If your space is done, they come in, they inspect it, and they give you a sign off for your space." He goes, "How could we build a store and stay under a TCO for 20 years? Because there's a 50 other tenants in the mall. And it took 2 decades for them to finally create an interim CFO that we now have available to us. So
Well,
sometimes just because you're the biggest doesn't mean you're the leader.
no. And in fact, it's you're talking about something that all of us are really big on: reducing the bureaucracy,
Oh,
making things happen, getting things done is so impressive, so important. We're doing an affordable. We just finished an affordable housing project in the Lower East Side. And when the crane came in to start lifting the floor planks in place, we had this enormous problem because there was a tree on the site. Well, getting
can't.
I mean, it was
Parks
a
Department.
nightmare, and it just slowed everything down so much. And there are so many ways around it that if you let us work our way around it, will help. But
Right.
it's not a question of partnering; it's a question of preventing things from happening, and that's something that, of course, we need to change. I mean, I
Well,
do believe in the Department of Buildings and what they do. I
of
feel like a
course.
partner with them. I want them to review our stuff.
Well, of course, we and they're there. You know, a lot of times people think that they're there just to give a permit, but in reality, we're very pro zoning, pro code. They're there not only to protect the people that are building the
Right.
building, they're there to protect the people that live in the building. They're there to protect the people walking in front of the building. So they have an essential role to make sure that these buildings are safe and the occupants are safe. Um, One thing that I did get out of my podcast that has been incredibly a changer for me, a game changer, is how I never realized how pro development New York City can be when they use the P3 model. When there is no P3 model, like when the 421A died, it stalled construction and housing tremendously. People just picked up their money and they went to Westchester, they went to New Jersey, they went to Philadelphia. They just left New York City and said, hey, our money's good anywhere to build
Yeah.
affordable housing. We don't need to be here. And I think without it, you can see the dip in the charts of how fast it just fell once those programs weren't in place. I mean, we do have the new programs in place now, but again, they're still out there. People are testing the waters. Nobody's building buildings more than 99 units. That seems to be
Yeah.
the magic cutoff because of labor costs and maintenance in the future. Um, so tell us a little bit about on the affordable housing side. Just throwing money at it doesn't solve it either.
No, I will say this though. A building, this is any building, a building is going to last. I'm sitting in my little office room in my apartment today, not in my regular office.
Hmm.
The building was built in 1930. So now it's going to soon be 100 years old.
Still
It's
standing.
still serving a need. I love living here, and it's a great building, a great pre-war building. And when you think about a building that's going to last 100 years, of course it's going to cost a lot to build. But when you think about it over the
Right.
lifetime of a building, it's not terribly expensive.
No,
It's worth the money.
no.
And once again, I think about the 133,000 units. And did I get that one right? That NYCHA has, and what the Met,
375,000.
yeah, what the Memdani administration has been talking about. Just reading in the paper about building a platform over the in Queens to build housing. How many housing units will this enormous platform hold? 12,000. I
Yeah,
mean, when you compare the difference, it's just,
it's
to me, it's
tiny.
quite amazing. It's amazing, and we
And
need many more housing units than that.
and Eric, we were on a couple of proposals over the years to do full zoning analysis for each site because they have millions of square feet left over on some of these sites.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but but there were problems when we looked at it. Like there was one site where they were class 3 buildings. They were masonry and wood. They were 5 stories. They had FAR that they could go to 12, but we didn't have any means to separate the lower half from the upper half to exceed the area and height limitations. So there were possibilities, but the codes didn't allow it. So I think that when New York State and New York City can get together and they can find solutions that they can enlarge these properties without taking on this tremendous cost. There is potential, I think, in the future for a lot more units to be added and not at this extreme cost.
Yeah.
So again, we go back to the P3 program. Who's thinking of these ideas? Which architects can bring them forward? Who can bring them to legislation to get them passed? And that's always, you know, a big thing. One of the things we talked about for a long time was the office to residential conversion.
Right.
And part of the problem there at the very beginning was you're using the multiple dwelling law that hadn't been changed for
Right.
65, 70 years. And
Right.
it's not a city law, it's a state
Right.
law. Now, the May is fighting with the governor. That's obviously politics that I don't like to talk about, but they couldn't make the change. So here you are, you're looking for units, but you can't fix the code that still talks about things from, 1963, 1965. And some of those laws and those sections of the multiple dwelling law were never updated to
Right.
today's time. So when people say, well, we need housing, we need it right away, it's not that simple.
Yeah, I think that the idea of two things that come to mind as you say this. One is micro units,
Yeah,
small. People in faraway countries live very well in smaller units with completed kitchens and bathrooms. You can do it all, but you don't have to have it in the sizes that are mandated here. And for some people, that's really, really important. Another thing is ADUs, alternate dwelling units on sites,
correct.
and we want to pass that kind of legislation. That's one thing, but will it actually happen without public help in terms of some sort of tax subsidy or some help to the
Right.
single family owner who doesn't have a clue about how to? They'd love that extra income,
Right,
but
but
they
they don't
don't
know
have
how to
a
convert it.
they don't know how to do it, and so you need the government to come in and help. The government's there for a reason, and it's valuable. And although lot of people think that government gets in the way, well, it can, but nothing's going to happen without a government that is at the very least a little bit
Well,
who
proactive.
wants to help.
Right. And the one of the things that I've had in my mind, Eric, just to give you an example, is, my father was an immigrant from Italy. He came here. He lived in a small farm in the middle of, outside of Naples, and he had 5 brothers and sisters, and they lived in a tiny house.
Yeah.
They had a great life.
Right.
They had a loving family. They didn't live in a 3,000 square foot house in the suburbs. They
Right.
didn't live in, a 2,000 square foot apartment in Midtown Manhattan. They lived in a tiny house, maybe 800 square feet. It had 2 bedrooms, bunk beds, and a whole bunch of places for an Italian family to eat and have their life together.
Right.
The biggest issue that I have with it is right now I live in Stamford, Connecticut, and I'm looking to put a 2-car garage on a home I downsized. My startup cost between an architect and an engineer to fulfill the requirements of my town is
Yeah.
$25,000.
Right.
So if a homeowner in Queens wants to convert their cellar level or their basement, now we could at least have the option before we did it. But even if they had a detached garage that was 500 square feet where you could make a studio out of it, their startup cost and renovation cost, who educates this homeowner? Who can
Yeah,
subsidize it for them? Who can give them a low interest loan to convert this? They'd love the income. But if they're going to spend $100,000
yeah.
they don't have to make a small unit, it's not going to work.
Yeah, so just by creating a law that allows for ADUs and think that they've accomplished something, nothing's been accomplished unless somebody can step in
Implement it.
and implement it in a way that makes sense for people. And another thing that I'm really worried about, I'm very involved in my chapter of the AIA here in New York City, and uh, we had
Kudos.
our
Great
group.
organization.
I'm a member of the housing committee. We had a group come in to talk to us about their group of building owners of um, um, affordable existing homes that are what's the term? I can't. I'm blocking the term now. They've been the rent's been stabilized over the years. What's the term for that?
Oh, I can't think of it either.
Yeah, my God. Rent control, rent subsidy.
Rent, rent,
Yeah,
rent stabilized and rent
rate
control.
stabilization. And they came in, and I mean, their problem is, and it's a real problem, this because many of these home landlords are small guys,
Right.
not big guys, and they cannot afford to bring their units up to code compliance. So they're letting them sit there, and there's maybe as many as I've been told as many as 50,000 units held off the market.
Oh, no, no. So Eric, to go back to that and put that in perspective, right? Back in, I believe it was the 80s and the early 90s, they called it apartment warehousing,
Yeah,
where
warehousing, right,
they said, okay, if you're not going to raise our rents, I'm not going to have someone take this apartment, pay back in the day a couple of $100 a month, where it costs me a couple of $100 a month just for the fuel. I'm better off leaving. And once they move in, they can't. They're able to stay there for durations of decades. So way back when they changed, I believe it's under the De Blasio administration, they changed the you know way that a landlord would spend right now. They say that the going rate for a one bedroom apartment is $80,000 to come in and renovate the entire unit, upgrade the electric, new kitchens, new bath, new floor tiles, new redo the whole apartment, paint it, clean the whole thing up. They were able to take that money and use it to raise the rent. Well, they stopped that. So we used to do probably 15 to 20 apartments a month for all different small. We're not talking, big like BlackRock that owns thousands
right,
of
right,
apartments. Talking about small landlords that own a couple of buildings in Manhattan. But someone would move out, they'd renovate it, they'd get a permit, they'd apply to the city, they'd get their credit,
right.
and they could raise the rent. Well, they froze that. Well, those people now, they're not going to take $80,000 of their money, put it into an apartment, and they're going to raise their rent $68.
Yeah,
It's
it's
so
horrible.
that is something that at some point it needs to be fixed.
Boy, you
But
said it. And now with all these things, local law
97, local law
97, and
11,
I
and
mean, what are we going to do? I mean, it's not just the interior of a unit. You might have a boiler that's 50 years old,
right. And if
no
you want to go to
insulation in the
electric,
exterior walls.
the
I mean,
electric upgrades are tremendous. You're
yeah,
waiting months to get power.
right.
So there's always a ripple effect. But again, everybody could come on the show, Eric, and we could always talk about the things we want to change. But there's always a lot of good in a lot of places. I think that no matter what the politic situation is, who the mayor is, who isn't the mayor. There's great people in New York City that continue to fight for units, for affordable housing, and I think that's part of the fabric. But as we go on, one of the things that seems to be coming up a lot, and I know you're involved this a lot as a Pratt graduate. Who happens to be one of our clients, and we love working at Pratt, uh, is getting young people into the architectural world? How do people like myself, like yourself, mentor young people to continue to come into the field of architecture in New York City? So tell us a little bit about. I know you're involved in some programs, but I'd love to hear about it.
Well, first of all, it's so important that there is the next generation who is as enthusiastic as we are, and more creative and young and energetic. That's the future is the next generation, and so we have to be very conscious of that. When I was elevated to fellowship of the American Institute of Architects, the College of Fellows, uh, we had a big black tie dinner. Oh,
Mhm.
you're now big, and there's two things you must do as a fellow. We were told by the chancellor. Number one is contribute to the scholarship funds that we put out, and number two is mentor young people. So I came back to New York City, and I looked around in my chapter, who has a lot of fellows. It's the biggest chapter. It's the 800-pound gorilla of
Well,
chapters
you have
in
the
the
biggest city.
nationwide. Yeah. And what are we doing? Well, we're doing nothing. They were doing nothing in terms of actually mentoring, and there's like several hundred fellows. So I got together. I'm bragging here a little bit, but I got together
That's
with
perfectly fine.
two of my two colleagues that were in the young professionals group, and I said, "We let's set up a mentoring program together." And we did. There was two young people and myself, and then we brought in a few other fellows, a few other young people. We set up an organization called Torch, as in passing the torch.
Yeah.
And now we do a one-on-one mentoring, and it's grown enormously in the years since then. And it's very
Congratulations.
important. So that's really important. Getting the people who've been around for a long time to let young people know that there's a future for them and that they shouldn't be afraid of it, even with AI and all that. That there's a place for them, and it's a wonderful profession to be in. And being a Pratt graduate, as you mentioned, Pratt has a wonderful program too. So I have I have a young woman who's a mentee or protege of mine that I'm dealing with right now. And each year we get a new person.
Oh, that's
But
great.
the thing is, if you're really into this, they become your lifelong friends.
Oh, then that's the most rewarding part. And
Yeah,
it's funny that you bring up the part about, you have to donate and help bring in funds for the fellowship. Um, and my grandmother used to always say it's easy to write the check, it's hard to get people to do.
yeah,
And that was based on her faith, that she would go to church and she
right.
would be involved at the church, and not only would she give a portion of her retirement fund to her parish, but she also, in her at her age, she would be involved in so many other things to help local people. So you're right, giving back and mentoring is a very, very satisfying thing.
Yeah,
Personally, for me, I know it is for you.
yeah,
So as more and more people get into architecture, back in the day there was draftsman, and then there was CAD, and now there's AI. So before you know it, what are architects really going to do? And I think there's a responsibility that, for there's the design portion, there's the construction administration point, there's the entitlement part that we do, which is code and zoning. There's so many different fields within the architectural world that young people can pick and choose something that they like. You didn't wake up one day like me and say, "Oh, okay, I'm 5 years old, I want to be an architect." I figured that out a little bit later on, right? Maybe
right.
I
Yeah,
was in high school when I went to Brooklyn Tech, and I found a passion for it because I love building, but I didn't want to be a contractor. I wanted to be the guy creating the vision, not the guy building it, right? So
yeah.
so as we move forward, right, Eric, a good friend of mine, Andrew Peters, who gets quoted every time on my show, he actually owes me a royalty pretty soon, um, that he is in the estimating business, and he always says they made the rear view mirror in a car small on purpose, because we need to look out through the windshield, which is much bigger, right? But we learn from our past. So we always try to wrap up the show with a question of my guests for them to give us kind of like a subjective guess of where they think things will be headed in the future. So yours will be a twofold question, so you'll have plenty of time to answer it. The first part is we're going to stay with the mentoring. AI is a big thing. How do you think the future of architecture gets integrated with humans and AI to continue to produce great things?
Yeah, that's hard to know right now. It's so many things are happening so quickly. What you were saying just a moment ago, though, is that architects, there's lots of different ways you can get involved in the field of architecture. As a designer, as a business person, into code stuff, into specifications, into field work, or working outside of the direct field of architecture, working for a contractor or in the
Sure.
city government. There's so many
So many
different ways.
possibilities.
And that's one of the things that I want to make sure that the young people understand, that you're getting a great education learning to solve problems, and you can take that education and go in any different way. And so many people who are just in school or just recently graduated from school, they still don't know exactly where they're going to fit in.
Of
And
course,
you tell them it's okay.
but
You
that's
know.
true. But I think that's true even with my own children that are grown now,
Yeah.
right? And their parents, uh, they have little children. They went to school for X and then they're doing Y. It's still within the same idea that they have, but their vision changed as
Yes.
they got experience. And they said,
Yeah.
oh, well, I happen to like this part of my world, so I'm going to go after that, right? And in
Right.
architecture, how many times do I speak to architects all the time that they came out of school, they thought they wanted to do new buildings, and they actually became landmark historians,
Right.
and they love it.
Yeah.
Mitchell
Exactly.
Kurtz came out of school, he was in the theater world, he left the
Right.
theater world, became an architect, and he stayed in the places of assembly world. So
Yeah.
there's always something that happens in a young person's career that makes them stay in architecture but steers them in a direction.
Right. And I think that's so important that they remain optimistic in an uncertain world. The world's always going to be, for all of us, uncertain.
Of
Should
course.
we fear AI? I don't think so. I think there's so many ways in which we can interact with the world as it is and what we're going to learn from that experience. I mean, we use Chat GBT and stuff in different ways. I mean, it's a real asset
We
for us.
I
Uh,
think it's an asset for everyone. Even for myself, I'm not going to lie. If I just want to get a general idea whether I need a rated wall in my boiler room of a one-family house, I, I put it in and it guided me somewhere. Then
yeah.
I took it and then I had to go verify it. But it gave me an idea. It gave me a sense of where to go. Where before, you know, we'd have architects calling us panicking because they couldn't find something in a section of the code, and we would spend hours going through it. Where now, so I think there has to be a place where we can embrace it, um, along with the young people that want to come into our field,
Hmm.
uh, to
You know,
embrace it and to make it part of our daily life, but not rely on it 100%.
in another way of looking at it for me, though, is how might I fear it? I might fear it because people only care about money.
Right.
They do not want to spend money in buildings or in the design process, and anything that can reduce the time and money involved is good. So
This
what
is
I
scary.
it's scary for us because what are we about if not dignity?
Right.
About the idea that people deserve a well-lived life and good design counts, and that is still a very humanistic proposition and
No
something we
doubt.
really so there will always be, I think, a point of us, but a place for us. But the whole idea of money is always going to be there, and it's always going to be a challenge for us to prove our worth in terms of the future of the human physical environment and its
I agree.
value to
I agree
life.
wholeheartedly with that because I never send a proposal where someone doesn't come back and says, "Well, we're, they just asked for our best and final." Okay, but
Yeah,
we sell consulting. We're not we're not making widgets somewhere and making them for a nickel and selling them for $10.
yeah,
We're offering our time and our expertise. So I
yeah,
you're you're right. You I would agree with that 100% that the fear factor is if it's going to be because it's faster and quicker and cheaper, does that make it the right path to creating buildings and designing buildings and not using our expertise for the person using that structure to have a great experience every day
yeah.
when they go there.
On the
And
other hand, we
I
like
think
to say,
that's very important.
we like to say, when is design finished? Answer: never.
Never. It's always organically growing.
Yeah.
And it's funny, if you've been in the business long enough, I remember doing some early projects up at Fordham University, and we did their football grandstand was our very first project with Swanky Hayden Connell and Humphreys and Harding, and
Remember those guys? Oh my God.
yes, yeah, decades ago. And I remember as a young architect starting my business, coming out of City College, like, oh my God, this is beautiful, and it was like amazing. And we go back to Fordham and we go, oh boy, they haven't renovated this thing in a long time. This is antiquated, right? Because it's evolved, it's
Right.
organically changed. The way we perceive the sport, the way we want to look at the sport, the way Fordham wants to present it, all of those things are important. And that's what makes change in architecture. That's what makes it all so great that there are some iconic pieces that require, like Madison Square Garden gets a facelift on the inside, but it's still Madison Square Garden, but it has modern amenities and the egress is better and things have gotten better. So when we look at architecture, you're right, there is a foundation, but there's also growth and change, and it's never going to stop. It just continues to mold and change and
Yeah.
go on its way. So our last question that I had asked you before is, where do you think housing is going in the next year? Um, I know we
Uh,
touched upon the P3, and I think that's an
yeah.
important role in it.
I'm a bit negative for two reasons. Number one, when is a city full? When is it done?
Never.
When is the logistics of getting to the center so difficult that it just we need a different kind of center? So that for me, the growth of New York, if we want to talk about it from that point of view,
Hmm.
the Brooklyn centers and Queens centers um, are new centers. You know,
Correct.
not everything needs to go to Midtown Manhattan,
Correct.
and the
Long Island
subway and
City,
bus system
Williamsburg, now the
has to.
Gowanus.
Yeah, when you look at the subway system, it's all focused toward here, and it
Right.
shouldn't be. It should be much more spread out and going directly from Brooklyn to Queens and the Bronx and all that sort of thing. So the city has to change its physical characteristics a little bit to make it a more usable and
Well,
friendly
that's
city,
that's
I
a
think.
that's a that's a great point because I went from Queens to Brooklyn Tech, and I always had to go through Grand Central. You
Yeah,
know, you always had to go to 42nd Street. If my father used to say, all roads lead to Rome. In New York City, all trains lead to 42nd Street. That was the epicenter of New York City,
I
and
know.
they're trying. I know Carlo from the Building Congress has talked about new railways going from Bay Ridge out to Jamaica, which is tremendous. They have the railroad track, everything's there. The city needs to find more ways to expand because all the expansion along the trains creates all this housing because
Yeah,
then people can get to
exactly.
work, people can move
Right.
around. They're not dependent on a car. They're dependent on the systems that the city gives them. So if you build infrastructure, we can build more housing.
So there's a lot of interest in infrastructure, but it's extremely expensive, and a law. It's very, very long term, far longer than the term of a mayor. or a
Yes.
councilman. And that's, I mean, you have to really be willing to think long term about that. And the second thing is that building new housing, and some of the affordable housing buildings that are going up now are not like they used to be. Where I remember we used to say you could always tell us a Section 202, which is senior citizens housing. I mean, they're the
Mhm.
dumbest little boxes you can imagine.
Right.
And
Now
we
you
don't want
can't
to
tell
do
them
that
apart.
anymore. We want to
No.
do handsome. We want to give people dignity, and some of the new affordable housing buildings that are going up these days are really quite wonderful.
Oh, beautiful.
And so my problem with that is it will only if it's a problem, it's that uh, the city's population is growing, and the more good stuff we build will attract more people to want to come. So
And
we're not just giving the existing people better housing, we are
correct.
inviting more and more people.
Right, and you see,
It's
and
a,
you drive around and you see these buildings, and before years ago, you could just by looking at them understand in essence you'd had a preconceived notion of w- what that building was being used for. Where today you can't tell which ones are
right.
affordable, which ones are market
Yeah, isn't
rate.
that
They're
wonderful?
mixed in, which is a great thing
That
because
is wonderful.
it's unified this whole idea of living together,
Yeah,
and I love it. Um,
yeah.
but
So
that
whether you
also
get,
comes
can you get ahead of this is what I'm asking. I mean,
I don't
can you
know.
build enough housing? It's going to attract more people, and you have to keep building and building, building. So the change in the city from infrastructure point of view, and different nodes of places that can grow that are now less than overbuilt is really really important
Well,
to do.
and we'll wrap the show up on this. I was a huge proponent of the city of yes. I
Yes,
think
me
that
too.
I think that Eric Adams' administration and the entire city planning commission did an incredible
Right,
job of recognizing wide streets, transportation. Why was there such a low density around these particular uh, places where that's where the expansion can happen. That's where
right.
you can allow the ability. Um, and kudos to them because I think it was a major change. I mean, we talked about zoning. Yeah, there was zoning changes in Williamsburg and Long Island City and many places throughout New York City. Now we're doing Midtown. We're going to do the garment district, right? But they're specific. This was taking on the entire city. I
Right.
mean, that's massive, and I honestly believe by breaking it into parts, they've done a real. Not everything is going to be perfect, Eric. We know that. You know that
Right.
this is a lot of people with a lot of visions to make this happen.
Yeah.
But when you look at it from the zoning side of it, I think they did an incredible job. And we're always knocking the system sometimes, but in this particular case, my opinion always was that from what we're seeing on our end with people calling us and asking us things, they did an incredible job.
Yeah. Let me say also, just to back you up on that, why didn't they do this years and years ago? I mean, what?
That's
And
when we
now that we have
started
a
the
new,
show.
yeah, now that when we have a new mayor, and they always want to diss the prior
Previous
one,
administration,
but
right?
this is one place where they should not do that. The city
I
of it
agree.
should be built upon, in my view.
100%. Well, Eric, it was an absolute pleasure to speak to you for more than 35 minutes about your passion and your love for New York City, which to
Yeah.
me, we're in the same place.
Yeah. Where
Uh,
would we go? I
where
mean,
would
I'm
we
not
go?
good.
There's no place like it. And off the air, we spoke a minute about how I got into the podcast world, and it was because of my children. And we'd be walking around Manhattan, and I'd say, "Well, I worked on that building. You know, this had a crazy theater in it, and you know, we did the third foot." And they'd be like, "Dad, you should tell people about these experiences." And today we had a little bit of that. As we've been around for 4 decades, we've seen a lot, built a lot,
We
been through
have.
a bunch of administrations, and and we're always optimistic that New York City, although there's always a little negativity, you're an optimistic person that architects can do great things in New York City, and you're part of that, you and your wife Nancy. So congratulations to an incredible career. Continue to have the energy to mentor young people and continue to build great things for us.
And for us to work together too. Thank you
Yes,
for inviting me again.
absolutely, Eric. Thank you.